Guys, welcome you all. This is Shakti from Shakti Academy. Please like our video and share. Don't forget to subscribe our channel. Press bell icon so that you could get updated videos of our channel. Right? Hello guys, and Imperial capital Vijayanagara is the topic of the day, right? So today we are going to discuss about the Imperial capital of Vijayanagara and the rulers of Vijayanagara who have been founded, and how did they have preserved their national monuments, and what are the temples they have built in the place of Vijayanagara, and how did they have compete with the rulers of Golconda and the Delhi Sultanates and other people, right? So the concept of the lessons are the Rayas, Nayakas and the Sultanates played an important role for struggling to get a kingdom of this Vijayanagara. In this, you know that the Harihara and Bukka, who were the famous brother, who were the reason for the founded of this Vijayanagara, as well as they have asserted their independence from the Delhi Sultanates, who have established their kingdom in Vijayanagara on AD 1336, right? So 1336 the year which where the Harihara and the Bukka, two brothers, were founded the region of Vijayanagara in the place of Karnataka, right? So next one is the king and the trading classes and the welfare depended mainly upon the powerful cavalry. Then Portuguese settled on the west coast in India and attempted to establish their power in the trading in the military stations. And the climax of the declines of Vijayanagara Empire and the Krishna Devaraya, as we know that he was a famous scholar as well as one of the ministers and the king of the Vijayanagaran, and his able ministers, and about the Krishna Devaraya, and we are going to discuss about in this lesson. And he built a number of dams for the irrigation of agriculture. Also he built the magnificent palaces and temples, and here Raya was miserably defeated at the battlefield, and Rakshi Tangadi. Okay, so Talikota war, this is one of the famous Talikota war which happened in AD 1565, and the victories of army plundered and destroyed the city of Vijayanagar. Then Vijayanagara Hampi architecture, as you know that the famous temple Hampi architecture, still the chariot of the Hampi is placed in the Indian rupees, and this Vijayanagara architecture of the period 1336 to 1365 was a unique building style evolved the Imperial Vijayanagara Empire. And here the people of Vijayanagar, they have brought some of the ideas from the Indo-Islamic styles. Okay, they have built with the Indo-Islamic styles, which they have shared the ideas of the architectural styles between from the Delhi Sultanates and the Golconda of other kings, right? Then Hampi bazaars, Portuguese travelers pays and then visited Hampi in the mid 1500th century, and they gave an account of the Hampi bazaars. Thus in the streets lived many merchants, and you will find all sorts of the rubies and diamonds, pearls and cloths that you may wish to buy. Buildings and the places, as we know that today the Vijayanagaran places and the buildings were derived from the archaeological excavation at the Hampi, as no royal palace structure have survived like Vijayanagaran palaces, right? Then King's Royal enclosures also have been found in the excavation of this Vijayanagara, and also another important building of the Hampi is in a royal king. I mean the King's Royal enclosure, and the post tells against the gate there were two circles in which there were the dancing women richly arrayed with many jewels of the gold and the diamonds and many pearls. Then Mahanavami Diba is also one of the beautiful station, especially it's one of the platform where the people used to perform their talents during the Mahanavami Diva. As you know that the famous festival which used to be conducted once in a year, that is known as, it's used to be conducted for 9 days. Initially it will be calling it as a Dasara festival, or sometimes Mahanavami Diba, right? So here this Mahanavami Diba consisting the 11,000 square feet, okay, 11,000 square feet with a height of 14 feet, and it seems to be supported with the wooden structures. Then forts in the Vijayanagara constant struggle for the power. Fort and the fortified settlements were being excavated in the place of Vijayanagara, and the rulers of Vijayanagaran Empire, they have created the cities within the main object and the protection against the invasion from the other rulers. And this city itself was a fortress and designed such as in every manner. Then Vijayanagara, or the city of victory. So the another name of the Vijayanagara is nothing but the city of victory, was the name of the both city and an empire. This empire founded in the 14th century. Not on this empire of Vijayanagara have been founded in the 14th century, that is nothing but 1336. Then in 1565 the city was sacked but subsequently deserted by the Sultan, and one of the most prominent waterwork to be seen among the ruins of this Raya canal. And in the terms of the temple architecture by this period, certain new features were being evidences have been found in the excavation happened by this British people, and best exemplified by the Raya Gopurams. Okay, Raya Gopurams or a royal gateway that often wafted the towers on the central shrine and signaled the presence of the temple from a great distance. These all in the temple were used for a variety of purposes, and the building that survived tell us about the way spaces were organized and used and how they were built with what material and techniques. So here what people are telling that the architecture, temple architectural styles, previously I told you that these temple architectural styles have been bought from the Indo-Islamic styles, and with this they have started building with the interlocking system, and the no cementing agent was used in this Hampi architectural buildings, and as well as here the material and the techniques, what are the materials and the techniques have been used by the rulers of Vijayanagara, and everything we are going to discuss in this chapter, right? So first one is a history of Vijayanagara. So as you know that the Vijayanagara or the city of victory, this name is often called both the empire of Vijayanagara as well as the city. This empire was founded in the 14th century. Then in 1565 the city was sacked and subsequently deserted, as we discussed, right? So although it fell into the ruin in the 17th to 18th century, it remained the memories of the people living in the Krishna Tungabhadra Doab as Hampi, a name derived from the local mother goddess Pampa Devi, right? So here, as you know that this Hampi was founded in the 1336 and finally ruined in 1565 due to the sultanates, and finally it was deserted, okay, sacked and subsequently deserted. But even though you know that the memories that used to be kept by the people, those who are living in the Krishna Tungabhadra Doab and as Hampi, right? So this Vijayanagara also known as this Hampi. This Hampi is the name which derived from the local mother goddess, that is a Pampa Devi. Pampa Devi is a mother goddess name which was derived by Hampi, right? The next one is the discovery of Hampi. This discovery of Hampi is nothing but the ruining of the Hampi were brought into the light in the 1800 by an engineer and the antiquarian named Colonel Colin Mackenzie, right? So Colonel Colin Mackenzie is one of the employee of this East India Company who contributed much. Actually, you know that Colonel Mackenzie was one of the surveyor, okay, a cartographer, he was one of the cartographer who used to prepare the map for the site, and later he brought the light into the world of Hampi in 1800, and he prepared the map of the Vijayanagara, and much of this initial information he received was based on the memories of the priest of the Virupaksha temple and the shrine of Pampa Devi, right? So as we discussed that the Pampa Devi was one of the local mother goddess. Here the Virupaksha temple, right? The Virupaksha temple is Virupaksha temple is one of the famous temple, was built by this Vijayanagara Empire. So in this the Pampa Devi also worshipped as a mother goddess, right? So Royas, Nayakas and the Sultans we are going to discuss. About the Royas is nothing but Harihara, Bukka, Krishna Deva, Raya. Actually his initial name is Krishna Deva, but the Raya is one of the community that the people used to adopt after their name. So after the Royas, then Nayakas came to be in extent and they have ruled the Vijayanagara, and after that the Sultans of Golconda and the Delhi Sultans, they have started contributing and controlling over the Vijayanagara Empire, right? So initially as we discussed that according to the epigraphic evidences, there were the two brothers, that is Harihara and Bukka, who have been founded the Vijayanagara Empire in 1336, right? So this empire included within the fluctuating frontiers people who spoke different languages and followed a different religious tradition. So here Harihara and Bukka, two Royas brother who did not force the people to follow the particular region and to speak the particular language. Instead the people started speaking the different languages and they started worshipping the different religious tradition, right? So the Vijayanagara kings competed with the contemporary rulers. So they have fought with the contemporary rulers like Delhi Sultans and the Gujapati rulers of Orissa, and the control over the fertile the river valleys, and the ruler of Vijayanagara who called themselves as Raya. So as we discussed that the Vijayanagara Empire who often called them as Royas, right? So then the warfare depended mainly upon the powerful cavalry. Then the Portuguese settled on the west coast of India in the attempt to establish their trading and the military station. So after the establishment of the Vijayanagara Empire in 1336, the latter the Portuguese people started establishing their factory in the western coast of this Karnataka for the trading and the military station, right? Next one is the trade in Vijayanagara. The trade in Vijayanagara is nothing but, as you know that, so the Vijayanagara was also noted its markets dealing dealing with the spices, textiles, and the precious stone, and they have imported and exported to different part of the continent, part of the subcontinent, even though the trade was often regarded as the status symbol for such cities, which means the trade also one of the magnificent profession of the people, those who are living in the Vijayanagara. There the people used to be export or import the market dealings like spices, textiles, and the precious stones. Then which boosted the wealthy population that demanded high value exotic goods, especially the precious stones and jewelers, right? So most probably the people were living in the place of the Vijayanagara. There the people often required the precious stones and the jewelers. That's what here the people are exchanging spices, textiles, and the spices and textiles for the precious stone from the different countries, right? Then climax and the decline of Vijayanagara. So previously we have discussed that how did the Vijayanagara Empire have been emerged. That is nothing but by the two brothers in 1336. Now the empire, okay, which means the climax, and how did the Vijayanagara Empire have been declined, right? So the first dynasty, as you know, that the Sangama dynasty. So there were the three dynasties where ruled the Vijayanagara. So first one is Sangama dynasty, who exercised their control till 1485, right? So next one is Saluva dynasty, and the next one is Duluva dynasty, right? So first one is Sangama dynasty, who ruled up to 1485. So next one is supplanted by the Saluvas, who were replaced by the Duluvas in 1503. So there were the three rulers who ruled Vijayanagara Empire, right? So the Krishna Devaraya belonged to the Duluva dynasty, which means the third dynasty, and his rule was characterized as an expansion and the consolidation, which means here among all the rulers like Harihara and Bukka, here the Krishna Devaraya contributed much, and he introduced many things, and he had built many temples and the palaces in the place of Vijayanagara. And that's what here the Krishna Devaraya is the person who credited with the building the stones, finds the temples, and adding impressive gopurams, especially the Virupaksha temple, and to many important South Indian temples, right? So the strain began to show within this imperial structure following the Krishna Devaraya death in 1529. So after the death of Krishna Devaraya, he died in 1529, and his successors, which means the successor of Krishna Devaraya were troubled by religious Nayakas and the military chiefs, right? So previously Krishna Devaraya king was there, so that however they were managing and competing with the other rulers like Nayakas and the other military chiefs. But here after the death of Vijayanagara, there is no one to rule the state of Vijayanagara. Now the successor of Krishna Devaraya, they were troubled by this religious Nayakas or military chiefs. So during this period, and indeed yearly, the military ambitions of the Deccan Sultanates resulted the shifting alignments. Eventually this led to be alliance of the Sultanates against Vijayanagara, right? So after the death of Krishna Devaraya, what happened, the Delhi Sultanates and the other Sultanates have met, they made an alliance against the Vijayanagara. So however it is here, the Sultan of Bijapur and Sultan of Delhi, they have alliance together, and they started taking a war against the Vijayanagara, right? So although the armies of sultans were responsible for the destruction of the city of Vijayanagara, so they were the reason, sultans were the reason for declining the Vijayanagara, and the relation between the Sultan and the Royals were not always been inevitably hostile, okay? So that's what here, this may be a reason that the sultans were taking war against this Vijayanagara Empire. Then in fact the Vijayanagara king were keen to ensure that stability of the sultanates in the vice versa, and after that even though they too want to struggle with the Vijayanagara Empire, right? So next one is the Royals and the Nayakas. So as we discussed that these Nayakas were the military chiefs who usually controlled the fort, had them armed supported. So previously we discussed that these Nayakas were not the king, but they were the military chiefs, right? So they moved from one area to another, and in many cases they accompanied by the peasants looking for the fertile land on which to settle. They usually spoke Telugu or Kannada. Initially these Nayakas used to speak Telugu or Kannada, and many Nayakas submitted to the authority of the kings of Vijayanagara, but they often rebelled and had to be subdued by the military action. Then the Amaranayaka system was, so you know that the Amaranayaka is one of the famous system which was adopted by them, and this was the major political innovation of the Vijayanagara Empire, right? So there were the military commanders who were given territories to govern by the Raya. So this is nothing but the Zamindari system and Dakladar system. So which means this Amaranayaka system is telling that these Nayakas people used to be adopt the land and which they wanted to govern, governed by the Royas, governed by the Royas, and after once in a periodically they wanted to collect the taxes from the peasant, and finally they wanted to pay to the Royas, I mean the Vijayanagaran empires, right? So these contingent provided the Vijayanagaran kings with an effective fighting forces which with which they brought the entire southern peninsula under their control. So finally what happened, you know, these Nayakas they started fighting each others for getting the control over this subcontinent. Then capital environs the water resources. So previously we have discussed that Krishna Devaraya is king of the Duluva dynasty, and who contributed plenty of the temples, and he had built the gopurams, and he had built many irrigation system for agriculture and other things, right? So here in this Vijayanagaram, the capital and the environs, the first one is the water resources. So the water resources is one of the main system which was used by the people by the river of the Tungabhadra, right? So initially, as we discussed, that the Hampi and the Vijayanagara was located in the Tungabhadra, Krishna Tungabhadra doab. So that's what here the main Krishna Tungabhadra river played an important role for the water facility to the people of Vijayanagara, and a number of streams flow down to the river from the granite hills, and here embankments were built along these streams to create the reservoirs by varying sizes, right? So from the big rivers they have created, Vijayanagara Empire, they have created the small canals for reaching all the places. So these canals may be different from one place to another place, right? So for the most arid zones, the peninsula, elaborate arrangements has to be made for the store rainwater. The most important such tank was built in the early years of the 15th century and is now called Kamalapuram tank. Not on Kamalapuram tank is one of the famous tank which was built during the 15th century for the water system to the people. Even they made some of the arrangements for saving the rainwater also, and one of the most prominent waterworks to be seen among the ruins is the Harihara canal. Harihara canal is one of the another canal system used by the people of Vijayanagaram, right? So next one is fortification and the road. So previously we have discussed about the water system, and then now the fortification and the road system during the Vijayanagaram Empire, right? Abdur Razak, an ambassador sent by the ruler of Persia to Calicut, the present day is known as Kolikot, right? So Nodan Abdur Razak is one of the ambassador who was sent by the Persian king to Calicut in the 15th century, was greatly impressed by the fortification and mentioned in the 7 lines of the fort which encircled not only the city but also its agriculture, hinterlands and forests. So as we discussed that Abdur Razak was an ambassador who was sent by the king of Persia to the Calicut. So at the time he had admired, totally impressed by the fortification and the road system and the canal irrigation system by this Vijayanagaran Empire. So after that he had mentioned the 7 lines, he had mentioned the 7 lines poem in which he encircled not only the city but also the agriculture, hinterlands and forest, right? So what was the most significant about this fortification, and is that it's enclosed agricultural tracts, and the archaeologists have also found the evidences of an agricultural tracts between the sacred center and the urban core, right? So here what is in the sacred center and the urban core is nothing but, as you know, that sacred center is nothing but where the people used to be worshipped. That is nothing but the place of the temple. So even though the temple was built with the tanks where the public used to be access the river, right? Access the tank, and sometimes that from the sacred center, the urban core, the people where used to be live. So this urban core, the people got a water supply from the temple tank. So that's the main reason still now some of the temples have owning their pond and water tanks and other things. So this tract was survived by an elaborate canal system and drawing water from the Tungabhadra. So Tungabhadra is nothing but is one of the river which is giving a main water resource, main water resource of the Vijayanagaran Empire. The second line of the fortification went around the inner core of the urban complex, and the third line surrounded by the royal center, and which in with the said the major building was surrounded by its own high wall. The roads generally generally wound around through the valleys, avoiding the rocky terrain. Some of the most important roads were extended to the temple's gateway and were lined by bazaars, right? So next one is we are going to discuss about the road system. This road system is not like not like a rocky terrain. Rocky terrain is nothing but without concrete or without any tar. Okay, it's like a natural way. Okay, so you cannot find any natural ways in this Vijayanagara Empire. Instead, the people have used plain roads. Sometimes these roads have been extended from the temple gateway, and in front of the temple gateway there will be plenty of spaces will be there, which often lined by these bazaars in the both sides. So initially, you know that in the present day temples, the outside of the temples many bazaars, and the shops, doll shops, many shops are there. No, so in the same thing, the Vijayanagara Empire also followed the same system of gateway and all lined by the bazaars. Next one is urban core. So urban core is nothing but where the ordinary people used to be live, but as you know that whenever you see about the history, for example, you cannot find any history about the ordinary people, which means that even though they have contributed a lot to develop the region, but here there is no history about the ordinary people. Only the history will be there about the kings, right? So here the archaeologists have found evidences of the houses of ordinary people along the road. The fine Chinese porcelain were also found from the Muslim residential quarter, and the tombs and the mosques were located there, but had their architectures like that the mandapas found in the temples of Hampi, right? So even though the people previously we have discussed that the people worshipped different languages and spoke different worshipped different religious cultures and spoke different languages, but here the evidences of the ordinary people have been excavated in the place of Vijayanagara. There the tombs and the mosques also have been excavated, but the architectural styles were being like a mandapas, right? Which means in the textbook, if you see a picture will be given. In this picture, the most probably the mosque will be like architectural arc manner, but here in this Vijayanagara they have given only like a mandapas, like a temples. Okay, mandapas like a temples. If you go through this NCERT textbook, easily you could understand by seeing the picture, right? So field surveys indicate that the entire area was dotted with the numerous shrines and the small temples, which proves the variety of cults existed and were supported by the different communities, right? So next one is the royal center. So previously we have discussed about the public places and the water tanks, road system and everything, right? So now about the royal center is nothing but palace, right? So this royal center was located in the southwestern part of the settlement, and about 30 buildings have been found in the palace, identified as the palaces. And one difference between this structure is the temple is that the latter were constructed entirely by masonry, while the superstructure of the secular building were made of perishable material, which means they have used many materials, and the superstructures also have been used, and here the masonry were being made by this royal center. So next one is Mahanavami Dibba. Previously we had discussed that. So what is Mahanavami Dibba is nothing but in the king's palace has two most impressive platforms, right? In the king's palace, two most impressive platforms were being there. So first one is called audience hall, and the next one is called Mahanavami Dibba, right? So the entire complex is surrounded by the high double walls with a street running between them. The audience hall is the place where the people used to be perform their talents, which means this audience hall is the high platform with slots for wooden pillars, right? So after that, next one is Mahanavami Dibba. Mahanavami Dibba is the massive platform rising from the base of 11,000 square feet and the height of 40 feet, right? So there is evidence that the supported of the wooden structure, the base of the platform is covered with the relief carvings, and the rituals associated with the structure of probably coincide in the Mahanavami. So as you know that literally the great 9th day, right? So Mahanavami during the Dasara festival, right? During the Dasara festival, the ninth day of the Dasara, the people used to be celebrate, and here the Mahanavami, the performance of the people used to be done in the Mahanavami Dibba. Here the Hindu festival used to be celebrate in the month of September and October, and here the Vijayanagara Empire played and they displayed their prestigious powers and the sovereignty and the occasion. So here the elephant, decorated elephants on the horses were being rallied and marched to in the platform where the kings used to be visit, and sometimes you know that the armies of Nayakas and the palace, king's palace, also combine together and they will do their marches, and the performance used to be happen, and these often will be visited, and sometimes these Nayakas used to be present annual gift to the king for getting to show their devotion on their king, right? Then other buildings in the royal center is nothing but the Lotus Mahal. Okay, so the Lotus Mahal is not like a Lotus temple, but it's a Lotus Mahal found in the Vijayanagara Empire. So what was the main purpose of the Lotus Mahal is nothing but, initially this Lotus Mahal is named by the British travelers in the 19th century, which the most temple were located in the sacred center, right? So this Lotus Mahal is nothing but, according to the archaeological evidences, they have telling that this Lotus Mahal have been used by the king, where he used to meet his ministers and the council of members. Okay, so that's why here the Lotus Mahal have been used to meet king and ministers and the court's ministers, right? So these sacred centers located in where in the several in the royal centers, as well as one of the most spectacular of this known as Azara Rama temple. Okay, Azara Rama temple is also one of the another temple which was plentifully built with more contribution, and that also been located inside the palace. So next one is the sacred center, right? So the sacred center is situated in the rocky northern end of the bank. So this sacred center is nothing but, there is one of the story, right? There is one of the story which is depicting the place of the sacred center, which is locating near the northern. Okay, actually this is one of the mountain, rocky mountain, which is locating in the bank of the river Tungabhadra, right? According to the Hindu tradition, this is a shelter of the monkey kingdom of Vali and the Sugriva mentioned in the Ramayana. So it's also telling that this may be the place where the monkey kingdom taken the sheldom for sheldom of Valley and the Sugriva is mentioned in the epic of Ramayana, right? But here the temple in the region are also the long history that going back to the dynasties such as the Pallavas, Chalukyas, and the Hoysala and Cholas, right? Most probably these rulers used to be done their excellent performance, show their excellent performances in the place of different countries, like you know that these Cholas people where they built the big temple of Tanjore and the Gangaikonda Cholapuram, other temples in Tamil Nadu, which shows an architectural evidences of this Cholas, right? So also here there is one of the story about this rocky mountain is nothing but where the Virupaksha, okay, I mean the Pampa Devi, previously we have discussed that the local mother goddess who was a penance for the several days to marry the Virupaksha, right? So this also one of the another story about this northern rocky mountain which was believed by the people of Vijayanagara. Then the rulers were very often encouraged the temple building as the means of associating themselves with the divine. And here the one important thing is, why did the people, especially the kings, used to be building the temples is nothing but to show their wealth, as well as whenever they won any any war against enemy or something, they used to be contributed something what they have looted from the opponent, enemy, they have to be contributed to the kings, contributed to the god. So that's what here the temple is a building by the king. And sometimes you know that this temple is not only place for the worship but also the place for learning, the center of learning. Then the rulers and the other often granted the land and other resources for the maintenance of the temples, and the temples were being significant religious, social, cultural and economic centers. So nowadays the temple are using only for the worshipping the god, but in the ancient days the temple played an important role, not only played an important role for worshipping the god and the social, cultural and the economic activities, right? So it's like that the very choice of the site Vijayanagara was inspired by the existence of the shrine Virupaksha and the Pampa Devi. In fact, the Vijayanagaran king claimed to be rule on behalf of the god Virupaksha. So previously I told you that one of the story about the Virupaksha and the Pampa Devi who had been in the penance for many years in the rocky mountain, right? So in the terms temple architecture, by this period certain new features, gopurams and mandapams were being emerged in the recent days by Nayakas and other people. And the Raya Gopuram or royal gateway is often drafted that towers the central shrines that signal the presence of the temple from the great distance. The next one is the other distinctive feature include the mandapas and the pavilion and the long pillared corridors that often ran around the shrines within this complex temple. And the Virupaksha temple was built over the century, as you know that built during the Vijayanagara Empire, while the inscription suggests that the earliest shrine dated to the 19th century. So when the people have excavated the place of Virupaksha temple, so at the time they couldn't find any statues of the god, but at that time they have found the inscription. They found the inscription which was lying on the wall, but that are telling that in the 19th century, but it was substantially enlarged with the establishment of Vijayanagara Empire, right? So as we discussed that Vijayanagara Empire was established in the 14th century, but this inscription are telling that that's a 19th century, right? So just as the Nayakas continued with the elaborated on the tradition of fortification, so they did with the tradition of the temple building. So here, even though when the Nayakas were being replaced by the Vijayanagaran Empire, I mean the Royals, and they did not destroy, I mean they did not destroy anything what the Vijayanagaran Empire, I mean the Royals have what the Royals have built, even they have fortified the preserved the traditions of the temple building, and in fact some of the most spectacular gopurams were built also by the local Nayakas, right? So this is how the histories and the development and how did the Royals have established their power and how did they have compete with the people of sultanates, and after the Royals, here the Nayakas were contributed their power, but even though the Nayakas contributed power, but they too give some preservation, they too preserved the ancient and the traditional temples which was built by this Vijayanagaran, and finally after this Nayakas, this empire was totally covered, captured by this sultanates, right? Thank you.